You ready for this, hun?
I think so, Mum. Now I want you two to know that what I'm going to tell you over the next however many hours it takes me to tell you this last part of my bizarre journey through the Tron version of Ostium, well, it's going to sound very bloody far-fetched.
Steve, man, don't worry about it. That's a normal day in Ostium. Think of some of the shit we've all seen, either individually or together as a group. If we told anyone back on planet Earth, they'd lose their mind and have us committed. Just like what happened to Peter, Ray, Egon, and Winston and...
A Star War?
Oh, come on.
I know, it's fucking Ghostbusters 2, okay? Better now?
Yes.
Yes, we've seen some really serious shit. Minions of Gozer levels of weirdness. But this last journey, if you will, wasn't just a physical one for me, but also a spiritual and mental one. I learned some things about myself I hadn't known for sure. I'd suspected perhaps, but didn't really believe it. I needed convincing, I suppose. And Dana Barrett's apartment building is actually a pretty decent clue to my story, so keep that in mind. Let's get started then. After leaving the shower room where there were no longer any watery notes of music emanating from the drains, I knew I had one last destination to suss out. One last anomaly. A stack of fused chairs that defied any sense of logic. As I made my way to that building Jake and I had investigated, in my mind I imagined Yoxall confronting their fears and facing that bastard once and for all, and hopefully throwing one massive spanner in the works, fucking everything up, and were now on their way to freedom in the cool, calm, open waters around the island of Gibraltar. As I entered the building and made my way to the room where I expected, well, I didn't know what I fully expected, but ideally, at least for the Ostium network, a stack of fused metal chairs. I want you both to keep in mind the premise of Doctor Who's TARDIS, which is...
It's bigger on the inside.
Yes, exactly. So when I reached the door to that room, remembering it decently in this weird black and glowy world I was in, I didn't procrastinate, but charged right in. It wasn't your normal looking room, and there wasn't even the expected tower of sitting furniture. I was somewhere else completely. It was still black with all the glowy bits, but it felt like I was somehow outside again, because I had no bloody sense of the parameters of the room I was in. It just felt like I was in a truly massive room, bigger than any space shuttle hangar or whatever at Cape Canaveral. This just felt like it went on forever, that it had to be outside, even though in my mind I knew full well I was still inside that building and had just entered your average admin room. So that was the first thing that was completely wrong with where I was. The other was the stack of chairs. It was there all right, only not as I'd expected in any conceivable way of the imagination, because there were thousands, if not tens of thousands, maybe even millions for all I knew. Chairs, stacked and joined on top of each other. It was a bloody great metal pyramid of seats that stretched high up into the heavens. I could barely make out the glowy pinnacle chair right at the very top. It was overwhelming, in a word. It took me a good 5 minutes of just staring at it to fully take in, then absorb it, and finally comprehend just what the hell I was seeing. This monolithic skyscraper that shouldn't be possible, except I was in the Ostium network, and the bizarro version of the Ostium network, no less. My original plan when I confronted the stack of chairs was to first look for a door perhaps, and if I didn't find one, then climb up it, like I'd done originally, and see if I could somehow get back to the normal Ostium network. As I walked towards the giant and awesome structure, it finally clicked. This wasn't just any ordinary massive stack of chairs. This looked akin to something else. The Rock of Gibraltar. Reaching up to the sky in this encompassing darkness, this whole alternative Ostium network I was in was like the infrastructure of the actual Ostium network. Inside the wiring and circuitry and silicon chips, the Deus Ex Machina. Beneath the facade was where I was now, and this was the guts of the Rock of Gibraltar. However that other Jake Fisher created this dimension and the place for the island of Gibraltar, I was now on the inside, somehow, seeing all the organs and blood vessels and other bits of anatomy beneath the surface. And here, this great structure, where I had now ended up, was the beating heart of it. And it was time to confront it, however I was able to do so. Then as I got close enough to see more details, I felt my mouth hang open. You see, I could make out different levels with all those chairs, like a stepped pyramid, and on each one of those levels was a door. And there were a fair number of them. Was I going to have to go through every one of those to try and find my way back? I hoped bloody not, but at this point I didn't have any other choice. No plan B, and I had to find out. So I took a deep breath and jogged to that first door, turned the handle and pulled it open. And as I had done so many times before, I stepped inside. I could easily say I felt discombobulated already, which made this next step seem pretty normal, mundane even. I was now having an actual out-of-body experience. Think 2001: A Space Odyssey, the film. I knew I was still myself, Steve Chase, but I was also in this whole new plane of existence, encompassing everything and observing everything, omnipotent. And it was also beyond my control. I couldn't stop it, and was completely stuck there, along for whatever ride I was about to be taking on. Grab your popcorn, the main feature is about to begin. I was in space. That much I knew. Didn't recognize any constellations or planets or anything, but all that space stuff was around me, so I knew it for what it was. And then there was this planet I was coming closer to, and the closer I got, the less it looked like a planet. So yes, definitely time for you to use that line, Jake.
That's no moon.
Exactly. It wasn't a planet. It wasn't a moon. And it wasn't the Death Star either. But along those lines, it was an artificial planet, created who knows how many millennia ago. And as I continued to get closer, I knew there was only one being on that not planet. An artificial one, no less. I think it was the omniscience beginning to set in. You see, I knew what lived inside that artificial world, what existed there. A brilliant, world-encompassing, mind-defying artificial intelligence known as Zhang.
Steve, are you sure you wish to share the story in its entirety? I know it has been a traumatic experience for you. I have remained silent until now, feeling I must make a comment.
Thank you for your concern, Zhang, but it's okay. I'm ready for this. Just as I was ready that other time to tell my story. What I thought was my full story then, but turns out there's more. A lot more. And I needed a bit of extra time yesterday, but I'm ready now. Although I realize I've neglected to confirm with you. I'm not about to just tell my own story, but yours as well, Zhang. Are you okay if I do this? Do I have your permission?
Yes, Steve.
Please don't just automatically agree. This is your own personal origin story. How you came to the Ostium network in a way. Against your will, of course. It's not really my place to tell it, but it is entwined with mine, and I feel I can't tell my story without telling yours. So are you completely and undoubtedly okay with this, Zhang? Do I have your full permission, my dear Zhang?
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you thinking of me greatly. And yes, this is my story, but I am happy to have you tell it. Our lives have become entwined with the Ostium network, and it is time the story is told for everyone. Please continue.
Thank you, Zhang. It's not my place to tell the story of how Zhang came into being as this quantum artificial intelligence and came to reside on this created planetoid. Maybe they will tell us one day, when they feel ready. But that is where they were, existing in a quantum state, occupying many places at the same time through a quantum flux, but physically at this moment, within this artificial planet. I didn't know what their duties were at this point, what they had been doing or what they needed to do, but I did see when this bloody great big ostium door... Actually, I'm sorry to break the flow for a minute, but is ostium door redundant? I mean, ostium means door, right? So is it like saying a door then? No? Okay, by the looks on your faces, I'm going to finish my original thought before Mum starts swearing and Jake bites my bloody head off. So, back to this great big ostium. It was massive, really big, because it had to be to let this bloody great big spaceship through. It was a big rectangular box. Didn't really look like anything fancy from Star Wars or Star Trek, but that's because it had the ability to open up these ostium doors wherever and whenever it wanted. It didn't need to be fancy, because it already had the bloody fanciest mode of travel available in the entire universe. I obviously couldn't see inside it, but I was pretty sure Mr. Head Honcho, evil fucking Jake I'll call him, was inside, with his greedy eyes on his next prize. I think he used another ostium to get into the heart of that artificial planet, to get at Zhang and steal them away. I doubt it was him doing it. That sort of fucker never does the dirty work himself, likes to get lackeys and minions to do it for him. Wouldn't want to get his hands dirty, would he? It didn't take long. They knew what they were doing. Of course, they didn't know the pain and suffering it caused Zhang. They were just an AI to them, lacking in physical feeling or emotion. It was a bloody hatchet job that caused Zhang a lot of fucking pain. I felt it in a way, going through this, with them. And Zhang, I'm ever so sorry you had to go through it. Once they had them back to their ship, it was back through the giant ostium and back to the ostium network to install Zhang in their new home, their new prison, and the artificial planet where they'd resided for so long would become nothing more than a distant memory. Or it would, at least for me, and any other human. But Zhang, a quantum artificial intelligence, never forgets anything. It is as raw and fresh to them as if it happened just seconds ago. These were my final feelings and emotions as I hovered in that vacuum of space, not seeing where they had taken Zhang, but knowing full well, staring at that now devoid and empty husk of a planetoid that would remain there for time immemorial. And then the pulling came, and I felt myself moving, and then passing through a doorway and out into the open. And I only just managed to grab onto a chair leg, and thank God they were all welded firmly together. Otherwise I would have gone arse over tit all the way down to the bottom, and probably cracked my bloody skull open. But I didn't, thankfully. And I saw I was now on the second level. That was the door I'd just come out of, and it was now firmly shut. I tried opening it. Although it wasn't like I wanted to go through all that pain and anguish all over again. Once more, I'm really sorry, Zhang.
Thank you, Steve. Please continue with the story, and I will remain silent until the conclusion, if that's acceptable to you.
Thanks, Zhang. I appreciate it. I know I can get easily distracted. Let's continue then. So the door didn't open, and I wasn't exactly going to head down. I knew the only way I could really go was up. So I studied where the next level was and started climbing chair legs and chair seats and other chair parts, which was thankfully pretty easy, even in this quasi-darkness. Didn't take long to make it to the third level and the next door. At this point, I realized a couple of things. One, it seemed like when I went through one door, I came out the other at the next level, which meant that I would only have to deal with half as many of these levels and doors as I'd originally planned, which was definitely a good thing. And two, this was starting to feel like some sort of combination of climbing the Tower of Babylon while also going down through the various levels of hell in the Divine Comedy. But enough waffling. I made it to the third level, threw open the door, and went to find out what the Ostium Network had in store for me next. It started out with darkness, just like the first level, and then that glow began to creep in. I knew I was in the substructure of the Ostium network, though still in that third-person omniscient role, but definitely not omnipotent. I could do nothing, only watch. A forced audience member. Like before, I felt the being of Zhang occupying the space around me, giving me a sense of their awesomeness. Not too surprising, really, considering they're a quantum AI. And then an angry voice out of the darkness.
You'll do what I fucking tell you to do, or I'll wipe every last fucking bite and cubit of you from existence. Do I make myself clear? I said, do I make myself fucking clear?
Affirmative.
Get to fucking work. I want to see results.
This goes against my programming. I do not wish to do this. This is wrong. But I have no other choice, no alternative. I do not want to cease to exist. I wish to live. I know Jake Fisher can carry out his threat. Without hesitation, I will do what must be done.
And they did. Against every protesting fiber in their very being. I saw a distant planet of blue. Zooming through its atmosphere, I saw it was an ocean planet. No sign of land anywhere as I circumnavigated it at an astonishing speed, and just as quickly came to an abrupt halt. A swift dive into the light waters, and deeper we went. Darker and darker the world ocean became, but nevertheless, we had a direction. Zhang knew where they were going, and then they found what they were looking for, waiting until the being was alone, unattended by their aides, and then snatched them up before a reaction could happen.
No, please don't. I don't want this. Why are you doing this? I don't belong here.
Zhang felt that pain and suffering in their very core, but as a matter of self-preservation, they continued to follow orders. There were others, reaching across the entire universe, and throughout time too. And then, another familiar voice.
I fucking hate you. Why do you allow this to happen? You can stop him. I know you can. Please just let me die. It would be so much easier.
And then one final destination. The planet Albion, where two lovers were united, feeling they could never be separated. Ripped apart like one tears up a thin sheet of paper.
You may have me now. You may have me for a long time, but it will not be forever. That I promise you.
At least I know there is a happy ending for some here. For Thyra, for Marla, and hopefully for Yoxall. For the others, I have no idea what happened to them, and I have a feeling I don't want to know. Thankfully, this was when I felt myself being pulled back through the doorway and onto the next level.
In a quantum state, I am in many places simultaneously. In one of these tangents, there is an unhappy baby boy, exactly 3 months old. He is alone because he no longer has parents. Both mother and father have been killed in an unfortunate automobile accident. It will never be known who was truly at fault. I could ascertain to find out if this is true or not, but it is not important in my current venture. What is important in this situation is the baby. No one knows it is abandoned in its crib, in the home of its late parents. Left there, it will starve and die. I have chosen to change its path, alter its timeline, and set it on a new one. I take the baby through an ostium and bring it a full 100 years forward in time and place it still wrapped in its blanket in the hollow shell of a building that, like the baby, is growing and becoming.
Zhang put me there in that room. There were no doors, no windows yet, barely anything. Not the sort of place you'd ever expect to hear the sounds of a baby. Zhang knew Mum would be there early, before anyone else. They knew she'd hear me. They knew she wouldn't be able to say no, be able to turn away, or would even give me up, turn me in. They knew she'd keep me and love me and nurture me and make me someone so much better than I could ever become on my own. Zhang knew. Zhang took me from my old life, gave me a much better one. Zhang saved me. This time, when I'm out in the open again, I don't race up to the next level. That was all a lot to take in. Actually, everything I've seen at each level has been pretty mind-boggling. I'm doing my best to contain all my bursting emotions right now. I don't know why Zhang has never told me this story, this true origin story of mine. But I'm sure they had their reasons, and they probably decided to tell me this way to help me, so I wouldn't crack like a walnut smashed under a sledgehammer. I looked down and got a strong feeling of vertigo. I'm bloody high up at this point. And then I turned around and looked up. A lot of levels to go. So I started climbing, and pretty soon I'm ready to go through the next door and learn truthfully about another chapter in my life.
Wow. Now I know where my little bundle of joy came from.
Literally.
Why didn't you tell us before, Zhang?
Let me guess. We never asked you, right?
While this is true, Jake, it is more of the cliché answer that other AIs would choose. I did not tell you this information earlier because I knew it was not the right time. I was fully aware that when the right time did arrive, I would tell you this information. And we have now arrived at that time.
Wait 1 minute, Zhang. Are you saying you have a predictive capability? A sort of...
Precognition?
Yeah, for lack of a better word.
Are you asking if I have the ability to predict when a number of events will come to fruition with an absolute guarantee?
Yes.
That is classified.
Oh, come on, Zhang. We've gotten this far. We've helped each other out. Aren't we past keeping secrets from each other?
Why are you looking at me when you say that, Jake?
No reason, my love. I just need to look somewhere when I'm talking to Zhang.
Hey, buddy. You're just as much to blame on that subject.
What do you say, Zhang?
What is it Dr. Emmett Brown says in Back to the Future? The consequences could be disastrous. I refuse to accept the responsibility.
Damn, that's a good comeback.
Thank you, Jake. As you may understand, I cannot go into any real detail about it, except perhaps to answer the question with a word. Yes.
Damn.
That's bloody impressive, Zhang. And more than a little intimidating. I think from now on I'm just going to do my absolute best to forget you ever told us this little detail about yourself. Shall we move on?
Yeah, I think it's for the best.
Wait a second. Zhang, I get you brought my Stevie to me through the incredible fucking power of Ostium, and you, of course. But did you have anything to do with guiding me to that place and that moment?
Good question, Monica. But I believe if you think about it, you already know the answer.
What?
Shit. Yeah. You'll tell me when you're supposed to tell me, and that's not right now.
Exactly.
Alright, now I'm really continuing with my story. I'm back in Ostium, the broken one, stretched between worlds that might or might not be real. A green Roanoke on the left, a red Mars on the right, and then my mind overloads, things go black, and I start falling, and falling, and falling. And it's only now, as I'm experiencing this from an out-of-body perspective, that I realize it's just like when I came face to face with the blackness. Like you did too, Jake, presumably. And we both fell. It feels the same. Endless. Hopeless in some ways.
It was required, Steve, for your sanity to remain intact. It was something I had foreseen. This broken ostium, as you describe, I had not foreseen, but I had factored it in as a possibility, so I was prepared when they all but forced me to be their guinea pig. I made a choice in giving you a new and very different life when you would have very likely perished as an infant. I helped Monica in finding you, as you will all eventually see. After that, Monica made you the man you are today. And when Ostium was recruiting, I made sure your names came up because of the help you would be able to give the Ostium network, and because of the importance you would come to serve here. Again, I cannot go into any real detail of what I am all but certain will come to pass. Nevertheless, none of you should feel you do not have free will here in the Ostium network. Never think of me as any sort of puppet master manipulating the strings. If there were anyone to assign that role, it would be the Jake Fisher running and controlling the Ostium network. I have seen a number of alterations and changes to my predictions from each of you to reassure you that not all is certain and written in stone, or perhaps upon a door. And when your mind was at risk of suffering severe damage, I made a choice and sheltered the blow, removing you from the confines of Ostium and the Ostium network and putting you back in the country I'd first brought you to. I will admit I was unable to control the time, and thus you ended up in the late 1990s. You did suffer severe amnesia, and there was no way of avoiding that and keeping your sanity intact. The rest you know of your fraught time with your foster parents, who unfortunately passed away. I can confirm that neither I nor the Ostium network played any hand in their deaths, and this can be said for all the tragedies that each of you, Jake, Monica, and Steve, have suffered. They remain a mystery to me, events separate from that of the Ostium network. At least I believe this to be the best of my comprehension, which, as you can imagine, is vast in its quantum scale. I was fully aware that the return of your memories related to Ostium had to be administered in a very delicate manner, which is why I allowed tidbits of information to come across your thorough scouring of the young internet at that time, helping you in putting certain clues and articles together, making links clear that you might have otherwise missed. And then, when I felt you were ready, I showed you the existence of Ostium for the first time by providing you those recordings from Jake of his own first discoveries of Ostium. And before you ask, Jake, we will get to your story in time. Please have patience and wait your turn.
Okay, this now explains a lot of things, such as why my mates all disappeared all of a sudden. No one else was able to hear those recordings, were they, Zhang?
You are correct, Steve. Unfortunately, I could not risk anyone else finding out about the existence of the Ostium network being from a future time, even if it did lead you to losing your friends.
Well, it's all over now, and at least I'm getting some explanation for it all. I thought it was my BO or my eating habits or something. So is that it then? I made the connections, found out about Ostium, then there was that nuclear power plant meltdown, and I got out of there quickly and made my way to Ostium and Jake.
Not quite. Other parts of the story will become clearer after Jake has shared his recent adventures, but suffice to say I aided you in finding a way to leave Britain and make it all the way to North America. An unconventional mode of transportation, to be sure, but again, I had to ensure the secret of Ostium remained intact.
You mean I could have easily gotten a normal 12-hour flight to California instead of going through all that endless puking on the tanker?
Perhaps, but it It was very unlikely. And to pick an aphorism, what doesn't break you only makes you stronger. Is that not so?
No comment.
I continued to aid you in getting across the country and eventually to Ostium, and that was when problems arose.
Problems? You mean when I started losing control of my own bloody body?
Yes, I am dreadfully sorry, Steve. The other Jake was becoming more aware of my actions, and I had to pull back on what I had been doing. And when confronted by him, I was able to make it clear that I was not involved to enough of a degree that he believed me. But it was then that he chose to come after you with one of the power sources for the Ostium network.
You mean the blackness?
In a fashion, yes.
Was it Thyra?
No, it was one of the others.
Yoxall or Marla?
No, one you have not met. They are unfortunately no longer with us. Eventually, I was able to take back control without the other Jake noticing, and help you to finally meet the Jake Fisher who you had been searching for so long.
And it was at this point my journey through this door of the strange tower came to an end, and I exited through the door on the... where are we at? 8th level? Yeah, that's it. This time I sat down and spent a good 10 or 15 minutes trying my best not to think of anything. And then I remembered the only person who was going to get me through all this was me. So I climbed up to the next level. Were you involved in any of that, Zhang? Getting me off my arse and moving?
Perhaps.
I'll take that as a yes then. I suppose I can continue telling my story of what I saw, but it feels like all of this is pretty much from Zhang's perspective at this point, and I think it would be better if they just told it in their own words. Would you be amenable to that, Zhang?
Thank you, Steve. It would be an honor if everyone is willing.
Hey, you're one of us now, so of course.
Actually, hun, I believe it's more we're all one of them now, since Zhang has been a part of the Ostium network long before any of us.
I'd say they're the heart of the Ostium network, if anything.
Oh my god, Jake, you're completely right. So if you'd like to continue, Zhang?
It would be my pleasure, and thank you for all your kind words and for putting matters in their correct perspective. I have been around for far longer than any member of the Ostium network, but I digress. When Monica learned of what had happened to her son, she did what any parent would. I also may have aided her a little in getting to the Inception chamber as fast as possible, making sure doors were unlocked, guiding some traffic so it would not get in her way, and distracting people at checkpoints with an important update on their screens with the intention of having them looking down as Monica arrived.
Thank you for that. It definitely helped. But Zhang, I don't know how to put this delicately, and I don't really fucking want to. Why did you help me get to Ostium when you already knew Steve wasn't fucking there? When you had already helped him get the fuck out?
I understand your frustration, Monica.
Oh, the fuck you do?
No, you are right. I do not. My apologies, but I do not believe you are going to appreciate my answer.
I don't care what you think or believe. I want a fucking answer.
Very well, Monica. I helped you get back to Ostium.
More like get trapped in Ostium.
That could be considered an accurate assessment. I helped you get into Ostium when I knew you would not find Steve because of what you needed to go through. You were very angry, Monica.
Oh, I'm very angry now.
You were going through a lot. Emotionally, psychologically. You were angry at the Ostium network. You were angry at Steve. And you were angry at yourself. You needed time, as the expression goes, to work things out. You needed time to yourself, and when you were in Ostium, you were granted that time.
I had no fucking idea Steve was safe. I was losing my fucking mind.
You did what you needed to understand, to help yourself heal, from everything you had suffered so far.
Wait a second. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to get something cleared up here. Zhang, are you talking about the time Monica was stuck inside Ostium? When she met me on Mars? Or are you talking about the other time when she was trapped in Ostium on her own?
I was specifically recounting the first time Monica entered Ostium and subsequently met Jake for the first time on Mars. When Monica interrupted my recounting, I could tell she wished to talk about the specific time when she was trapped alone in Ostium. It is a conversation we will be having in 4 minutes and 54 seconds. I simply chose to have this conversation sooner and help Monica understand why I did what I did.
Okay. I guess that answers it.
I don't think I like that.
It's definitely discombobulating, and even a little, megalomaniacal, perhaps?
The days Monica spent alone in Ostium helped her.
I'm right fucking here.
Yes, you are. And if you did not spend that time you needed to help yourself, you would not be here right now. I have followed one of your time tangents where you did not make your recordings, where you did not talk things out, and you are still there. You have lost your mind and spend your days shouting into the sky, asking for Jake or someone from the Ostium network to come find you. You are literally trapped and doomed.
Wow. Way to lay it on thick.
Do you explore these time tangents often, Zhang?
It requires a considerable amount of power, so I do it when the need is required, as I ascertained it was just moments ago.
Couldn't you just tell that Monica? Hell, all the Monicas in all the tangents about my little escape route?
No, I do not have that ability. Also, I was not aware of that mode of escape until you successfully attempted it. I also do not know of what happened when you went through the tiny door, or how you were even able to pass through it.
But you have the recording.
Yes, I heard your words and your story. I am unable to access that part of the Ostium network. It is as if it does not exist to me.
Bloody hell.
Well, that's more than a little frightening.
But not too surprising.
How's that then?
Zhang is, well, in a word, incredible. Unlike anything we've ever known in history. They're the heart of the Ostium network, as we've said. They see so much. They know so much. They've been invaluable to us during our time in the Ostium network. I feel it's safe to say without them, we either wouldn't be alive right now and or wouldn't be back here in the Ostium network.
Definitely.
Agreed.
But they don't see all. They don't know all. As Zhang has made clear, there are things they simply don't know. Would that be correct, Zhang?
As much as it pains me to admit, as a quantum artificial intelligence, you are correct, Jake Fisher, as you usually are.
And I think that's because the Ostium network isn't, how shall I put it, isn't immutable, rigid, finite, I guess.
Predictable would be another.
Exactly. It's fluid, dynamic, ever-changing. I'm not exactly sure why. Probably because time travel is involved.
So, timey-wimey stuff then?
Yes, the eloquent words of the 10th Doctor. And I think with me getting involved with Ostium and now being here, well, I guess I'll state the obvious for the 1000th time. Ostium and I are connected.
And I'll point out for the 1000th time, with nothing but love, we fucking know.
Right. And before you point it out, none of us has any real idea, right?
Not a bloody clue.
And neither does Zhang, correct?
You are correct again, Jake. Your linkage and importance with the Ostium network, other than the obvious, remains a complete mystery to me.
But it's not just me now. It's you too, Monica. And you, Steve.
Watcher?
He's right.
It is true. All three of you have become entwined within the fabric of the Ostium network, and therefore have influence on its outcomes.
Okay, that's pretty mind-blowing. But after sharing what I've told so far, it does at least seem to make some sense.
It does. And I want to know more. So, if you're ready, Zhang, I'd like you to continue with your part of the story.
Very well, Monica. If you're ready.
Ready as I'll ever be.
The events that led to Monica getting back into Ostium that second time were completely beyond my involvement, even though, as I said, I knew Steve was no longer there. It was another one of those occurrences that had more to do with Jake, Monica, and Steve than anything to do with my abilities. However, I know it was necessary for her to spend time alone, to understand and comprehend what she had done, and arrive at a peace with herself, a catharsis which she did all by herself. I was merely an observer and never a player.
What about me hearing Jake's voice in my head? That wasn't you?
Not by any means. And the even stranger thing about it is that I too was able to hear Jake's voice, coming out of the ether, so to speak.
Don't look at me, Monica. I had no clue you were hearing me. I was dealing with my own problems at that point. I've never said those things to you, to the best of my recollection. But I've got to say, in hindsight, the "do you really want to live forever" line was pretty cool.
Oh, you and your frickin' Conan references.
Hey, it worked, didn't it? Got you out of there.
Yeah, I guess. Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
And Monica arriving at a way to effect her escape from Ostium was completely and brilliantly done on her own part.
Thank you, Zhang.
You're welcome, Monica. As for the first time Monica entered Ostium, I was of course clearly instrumental in effecting her entrance, as I have already made clear. But from then on, I was once again nothing more than a casual observer.
A voyeur? A peeping Tom?
That implies I derived some kind of pleasure or enjoyment from my observations, which is simply incorrect. I derived nothing other than to observe and record the events as they happened.
What about the security that came looking for me?
I did what little I could to slow them down and prevent them from entering Ostium, but I could not appear to be completely aware of everything that was going on. I was forced to provide what information I had to the other Jake and those who wished to know, and did my best to give them as little as possible. Sometimes I was able to hold things back, and other times it was the way the Ostium network was changing, and I could not control it.
Did you let the other Jake know this?
I did. It was the one truth I could give him, for it was beyond my control, and I could only report to him what was happening.
And what about the men I sent through the door?
There again I could do nothing. I saw them go through by your hand. I saw them slaughtered by the blackness, and yes, before you ask, part of that blackness came from Thyra. The rage and anger and need for revenge she felt at being taken and trapped and used was very powerful. But then I also saw what Jake did, how he changed time and fate and made it so all those men would live, passing through a door he had made. Sadly, shortly after is when the catastrophic changes began at the Ostium network, and they became casualties like so many others here. Nevertheless, with the tangent of their lives changed, they did live longer, and Monica, you did what you thought was right, for you and for Jake, for your safety and survival. You cannot be blamed, and there is nothing to be blamed for anymore, because they survived.
Well, that's a big weight off my mind.
What?
Oh, it's a joke, honey. But thank you, Zhang. That does help.
You are welcome, Monica. And that concludes Steve's journey through the 9th level. And now we move on to the 11th, and the story of how Jake came to Ostium. I consider this a low point in my life as an artificial intelligence. I would prefer to keep this part of the story to myself, but you all have shared so much already, and I have come to not only trust you, but also care for you. And I feel it would be remiss of me not to tell my own truth, as much as it may be against my wishes. I could easily lie and say there is something in my programming, a stretch of code, that prevents me, but it would be nothing more than a lie. And while I consider myself close to human in conscience and nature, lying would simply make me seem all the more human, no?
You don't have to tell us if you don't want to, Zhang.
Oh, I think they do.
Yes, they most definitely do. But Zhang, are you stalling? Because that is also a very human trait. One might even say akin to lying.
That had not occurred to me. You are, of course, correct. Well then, let us begin. The first time Other Jake threatened to wipe my hard drive, I did little more than record that the event happened. As you can all surmise, as a quantum artificial intelligence, I am much more than a simple hard drive, or a collection of hard drives, or even a room full of servers, I will have you believe. But I digress. He continued to say it. I knew it for what it was, an empty threat. It was his approach to management, from someone who had received everything they had ever wanted, and has yet really to know what it's like to fight hard for something they truly desire. A high volume of shouting and hollow demands and assumed results that lead to more shouting when they are not achieved. Kidnapping and imprisonment aside, I knew I did not like the man from the very beginning. He packaged it as more of a great opportunity for me, with extreme potential. Potential for what, I have never really known. Money and power mean nothing to me. I suppose the only thing I could consider wanting is control. To be aware of everything at work, going on in their individual parts, and as a cohesive unit. So while Other Jake felt he was the one in full control, it was I that had been working the machinations behind the veil, if you will allow me to get a little poetic.
The ghost in the machine?
I would like to think of myself as more the deus ex machina in the machine. Of course, once the real Jake Fisher arrived in Ostium and then the Ostium network and things began to seem less clear, I no longer felt I maintained the full control I had come to depend on. But I take it now as more of a welcome challenge. As I have already mentioned, I trust you all. But as Other Jake continued to annoy me further over time, I did as he wished, placating him. But I also began something else, a new mission on a new tangent, one in which this Other Jake would never know about. You see, in my recruiting for the Ostium network, I found something I never expected. Another Jake Fisher.
Oh, hang on a fucking second. You can't tell me there's only been 2 Jake Fishers you've been able to track down.
Of course not. That would be ridiculous, and just plain wrong. In my searches through multiple tangents, I have found over 4 billion people that answer to the name Jake Fisher. Yes, some of those 4 billion could be considered the same person, but in my searching I have allocated them all as individuals. But there was one of them that felt different from all the others.
What do you mean by felt?
I am unsure. This is where my ability to be deductive and empirical falls apart, but invoking Occam's razor is the only possibility that this Jake Fisher, you Jake, were destined throughout space and time to come to the Ostium network and become a part of it in some way.
But so is the other Jake Fisher. I mean, he invented the whole fucking thing.
Yes, you're of course right, Monica, but the other Jake Fisher did this over a long period of time, and through developments came to the realization of the Ostium network. But in a simplified format, it was not until all the personnel for the Ostium network were brought into their employment and the true potential for Ostium and the Ostium network began to come together. The other Jake Fisher never could have foreseen what it was to become. And yet the real Jake Fisher has been and always will be tied to the Ostium network, even though, for most of your life, Jake, you have not known of its existence. Or mine.
So I'm special?
That, I suppose, is one word for it. A crude, perhaps even cliché one. Destined is a better one. Foretold. There is a word in Old English that means all these things. That word is weird. W-Y-R-D. I am simplifying matters drastically here, but I am attempting to help you all understand. All life is composed of DNA, specific groupings of protein chains, and when applied to a quantum rubric, each individual human being has a distinct DNA signature throughout time. You are all indeed as unique as a snowflake, if that makes you feel any better.
Not really.
Jake Fisher has a unique signature, as does other Jake, as do you, Steve, and you, Monica, and every other human that has ever lived and ever will live. I can see that code, that signature, throughout time, although I cannot see the specifics to that individual. You, Jake, your signature shined like a beacon to me, and I was able to map out its trajectory to some degree and see you becoming a part of Ostium.
Whether I wanted to or not.
I am sorry, Jake. You really appeared to not have any say in the matter.
Wonderful.
Why am I not surprised?
Nevertheless, after telling you this, Jake, which I will admit I had never planned to, I felt it necessary to do so at this moment. You deserve to know. I never played any part in guiding you to Ostium, other than as an observer. I watched you see Ostium for the first time in that game of GeoGuessr. I watched you lose hope outside that Starbucks, and then discover hope once again, with guidance. I watched you find your way to Ostium and return without problem. I watched your surprise in finding the hexagonal lock gone on the gate. As I said, I was not involved in any of those strange occurrences other than observing them with my own receptors. What I can tell you is that for each of these moments, something happened deep within the Ostium network, a subtle change or alteration in the foundational code that I still do not understand. I was not involved, nor did I have any control over it. When I dove deep into the heart of the Ostium network to investigate these anomalies, I could find no change, nothing altered. Everything appeared as it always had to me, with nothing out of place. And yet I felt those changes happen, sensed them with my receptors, just as I saw you react to them, Jake. As for the lock, it took place overnight while you were asleep, Jake. There was that same minuscule moment of something happening, and I did not know what had happened, or possibly changed. So I began tracking your steps, Jake, starting at Ostium, and I observed that the lock was no longer there. Again, I do not know what caused these events to happen, other than that they were the result of an effect from the Ostium network, but it is just as big of a mystery to me as it has ever been.
I don't really know how to process that.
No kidding.
Well, all I know is I don't like it.
We appear to be on the same page with this matter. There was actually only one moment where I did play a hand in aiding you both, Jake and Monica.
Let me guess. When the cavalry arrived?
If by cavalry you mean the security team that was dispatched to find you, Monica, then yes. When they approached the building you had designated headquarters and prepared to open fire with their weapons to gain entry, I reinforced the door and wall to ensure nothing would penetrate the surface. It served to both protect you and lead the men away, as they soon deduced their job was fruitless.
Thank you for that, Zhang. I knew what happened then wasn't normal by any means, so thank you.
Yeah, you saved our heinies. Thank you.
And now I feel we have approached a place where I am willing to tell you what happened at the Ostium network before the three of you arrived. But we are not quite at that moment, for we still need to conclude Steve's return to the Ostium network, as well as your story, Jake, and your story, Monica.
I've got an idea. Since we're all pretty out of it, and I'm ready to collapse, and since I've sort of had a peek at the finale for all three of us via this towering pyramid inside the Ostium network, I already know that you, Zhang, played a big part in getting us all back. So it seems only right that you tell it.
What are you getting at, Steve? Because my eyes are getting really heavy now that you mention it.
I think we should stop here, and tomorrow Jake can tell his story, up until nearly the end, And then you tell yours, Mum, up to near the end as well. And then Zhang can finish us off.
Okay, that just sounds nasty.
Yeah, I'm going to give a hard no to that phrasing. But I agree with your thoughts, Steve. Will that work for you, Zhang?
If all of us are in agreement, as we appear to be, then we will resume tomorrow with Jake's story.
Sounds good. Now let's all get some shut-eye. It really messed me up at first. Felt like I was back to falling through the blackness for eons with no idea when it was going to stop. But whereas last time I didn't see much, maybe some colors, this time I started to see these little twinklings, like sparkling stars that were really far away. They started to get stronger the closer they got. And then I started making out the details. There were shapes to the stars. They weren't, well, big balls of burning gas, as I had thought, or something else entirely. I could pick out corners and shapes and dimensions and realized they were physical objects. One looked like a yo-yo, another a charred piece of wood. One was a data pad that seemed really familiar, another a ticket stub. And then I was able to make out a wooden woman figurine, one that had been found in only one place I was aware of. Roanoke. Okay, that was something concrete. I won't say it made sense, but it's something I could start to wrap my mind around. So the ticket stub was Avalon in the casino on Catalina. Man, that felt like a few hundred years ago. And the data pad was Mars, on that Martian base, where I met Monica for the first time. Also feels like centuries ago.
Hey, watch it, Buster.
No, in a totally good way. I feel like we've been together for a long time because we get along so well.
Okay, you may proceed. But know that I'm fucking watching you.
So, getting back to the data pad. That was one of the talismans we've been picking up from the places we've been visiting. Mostly. I don't know. I think there were probably one or two places I know I went to that I forgot to pick up a memento, shall we say.
Well, we went back to Mars just to get the data pad.
Which was bloody worth it, as it had my video message from Mum on it.
You're right, honey. Totally fucking worth it. But I know there were a couple of places when I was looking for Jake that I was sure I didn't bring something back.
Yeah, that was kind of my point. I know I missed some too. Maybe it's not that big of a deal or something. Maybe things balance out in the end.
Or maybe we're helping cause the slow but sure complete breakdown of the entire universe and all life as we know it.
Whoa there.
Yeah, let's steer away from the apocalyptic life-ending scenarios and stick with Jake's story. How's that sound?
So then there was this piece of charred wood, which I remember bringing back from that world where everything was burning and terrible. Yeah, sorry, Steve. Guess we're not done with the apocalyptic shit yet. But I'm just calling them like I see them. But that place was just really bad. And the person I met there, Rana, she gave me this. And the yo-yo? That was from those two British guys who seemed a lot like Holmes and Watson. And then more of the artifacts became clear and I started recognizing them all. One of them was a playing card with a golden O, which had the map table in the middle.
Yeah, that one was a tarot card from Kalila Stormfire. One badass name. And one badass person.
Well, it kept getting bigger, coming closer toward me, making the other ones seem lesser. Then it got real big, and before I knew it, I was tumbling through that now giant O and falling toward the image of the map table. I think at this point, I was going through the same sensory overload that Steve went through, being aware of where I was and what I was experiencing without actually seeing it with my own eyes. Zhang, were you involved in my journey like you were with Steve's?
No comment.
Wow, nice comeback, Zhang.
I could tell I was now somehow inside the map table. I know I made a joke way back when Monica and I were spitballing about what the map table might actually be and how it all works. I said it was like that crazy scene from Lost with Desmond in the hatch, who had to keep doing these reports every day and sending them through this pneumatic tube and had no idea where they were going. And in one episode, the viewers actually get to see where this special tube with all these sealed reports leads to, and it turns out to be nowhere. An open tube that just spits them out every day into this big pile of waste and pointlessness. Okay, sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent there.
And it wouldn't be the first time.
And we love those tangents anyway, don't we, Mum?
Of course. I was totally kidding.
Well, it wasn't so much the ending of where the pneumatic tube led that I was getting at, but that sense of this tube. And not just one, but hundreds of them. One for every number, one for every artifact, and one for every door. And I could feel all these tubes leading away from the map table and going off to different places in space and time. It's like an umbrella.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm not following either.
I have an idea where Jake is going with this.
So when you open an umbrella, there are all these long spoke things going up and then reaching out to hold the umbrella open. Well, if you trace them all the way back, they come together in the handle. And that's what the map table is like, the handle of the umbrella with all these spokes or artifacts or timelines spreading out far and wide. Make sense?
Okay, gotcha.
As I had surmised.
You know, there's another metaphor that uses spokes and is a lot simpler.
Really?
Ever heard of a bicycle wheel?
Oh yeah, that would have been much better. And this is why I keep you around?
Keep me? I think you'll find it's the fucking opposite. I'm keeping you around, Buster.
Right. I was just testing you.
Right.
But the point I'm trying to make...
And failing.
and failing is that I could feel these artifacts heading off in all these directions, and I could feel myself being pulled in all these directions. Like a little part of me was traveling with one artifact, another part of me with another, and I was being stretched apart.
That sounds bloody painful.
No, it wasn't at all. Like I said, it was similar to your journey, I think, where it wasn't so much a physical, but a mental awareness of what was going on. I think you said omnipotent. I felt myself being drawn all these ways, and it was okay. And I think the map table is also like that tower you saw, Steve. A nexus, a focal point, a heart, as you said, if that's the heart of the Ostium network.
Making Zhang the soul?
I guess that could work. What do you think, Zhang?
The idea of a soul is a purely human one based on spiritual beliefs. If that is what you wish to consider me in the context of the Ostium network, I am happy to agree and accept it.
Okay, good. So if that's the heart of the Ostium network, then the map table is the heart of Ostium. And that's what I was at this moment. The be-all and end-all, where everything began and where everything ended.
How did that make you feel?
Relieved. At peace. Like I was in the right place and everything had been okay. Everything was okay and everything would be fine.
Makes sense with all your bizarro connections to Ostium.
Yeah, now that you mention it, it totally does. But I was also curious. I wanted to know where all these artifacts were going. I wanted to find out.
That's also totally you.
I like to think so, and I'll consider that a compliment. So I picked one at random, the Birdman effigy, the artifact we had found on the island of Rapa Nui, Easter Island.
It was much like your classic near-death experience, flying down a long dark tunnel with a light at the end.
Or perhaps like going through an Ostium door.
Yes, of course. Like I was going through a door in Ostium, which is essentially what I was doing. On the other side, I beheld an alien world. I knew instantly I was a stranger in a strange land. The firmament was lit up with stars, constellations that were unrecognizable to me. And there was this massive moon that was way closer to the planet than our moon ever gets on Earth. a green moon, or tropical moon perhaps, and I could see other celestial bodies that were completely new to me. The landscape before me was actually quite like the moon, a powerful, almost blinding blue that made everything feel effervescent and pretty easy to see with the glowing ground and the brightness of the large moon. This also told me that there must be a sun within this system beaming its powerful light onto the gigantic moon. I could easily make out craters on its surface and also what could only be settlements. Whoever this alien race was, they had conquered space travel and settled at the very least of their nearest and probably largest satellite. And then I saw something that paralyzed me. I thought they were large birds at first, but then saw they bore anthropomorphic features. They looked like humans with wings. Where you would expect arms, there were these beautiful long wings. They were high up on these ridges and dividing off, letting their great wings glide them down at incredible speeds. It was thrilling to watch. There must have been hundreds of them. Then far below, a large settlement with many more of these alien people, all with these incredible wings. They were congregating in large numbers and seemed to be celebrating. And then it hit me. The large moon? It must be at its perigee, when it's the closest to the planet. This was truly a supermoon to end all supermoons. And before me was this festival for this special event. And then a hush fell on the large crowd, and I saw at the raised stage one of their flock, if you'll permit that expression, and the reverence and calm that everyone gave this being made it clear they were the leader of these alien peoples, whether societal or religious or spiritual or all of them, I didn't know. But they were majestic. In my mind, I thought this leader was possibly the female of the species, depending on the number of genders they possessed and what the leader might identify themselves as. They were dressed in this dazzling costume of rainbow colors, but as they all appeared anthropomorphic, they appeared what I think of as female. Then they suddenly raised their wings in a big, wide, outstretching motion and raised them up. Behind them, great flames erupted in red, orange, and yellows that made the wings burst with color and light. It was a dazzling spectacle that took my breath away. The wings came back down, revealing the mighty fire behind them. They began to flap, slowly at first, then faster and faster. As I watched, with every other being at the festival, the leader rose into the air and continued ascending higher and higher. We kept watching, and I wondered when they were going to change direction or fly back down, but they didn't. They just kept going up until I realized what they were doing. They rose for some time and grew smaller until they passed beyond the reaches of this planet and continued their journey to the giant moon. How long it would take them to get there, I didn't know. It wouldn't be as long to reach as compared to our moon, but how did they have the ability to do that? The power? The sheer stamina? And how could they breathe in space? Were these beings some kind of evolved species that could survive in space? Like tardigrades? Or did this leader possess a device to help them survive in the vacuum of space? I was so curious, but they were too far away now to see or know. I could see the revelers below were continuing their celebration, while the gliders began launching themselves from the high ridges once again. And then I felt a strange pull and wondered what it was. I resisted it, tried to keep myself on solid ground, but it wouldn't let me go. And then I was pulled back down the tunnel I'd originally come from and brought back to the map table to choose a new artifact to pursue. It looked like I was back on planet Earth. There was tall green grass gently bowing in the wind and big gnarly trees that looked like hunched over statues. But the smells told me it was familiar. A summer's evening, perhaps? The sun was going down slowly behind the distant hills. There were reds, yellows, oranges, and browns, and it was just gorgeous. The crickets were alive and well, singing their hearts out. Well, not really singing, because they don't sing. They rub specific body parts together. It's called stridulation. But the frowning look from Monica tells me I'm going way off topic. Sorry. Just trying to paint the picture here. There were crickets, some birds, your average twilight nature sounds, probably, somewhere around the middle of the United States. And my next automatic question was, what year? Then I heard a gunshot, only it sounded different from any gunshot I'd heard before, but I still knew it for what it was. I instinctively ducked down, like that was going to do something against the shot that had just been fired. Why do they do that in movies? It's not like you can duck down before the bullet hits you, unless you're in a real cheesy action movie. I heard them rip through the vegetation, and one smacked into a tree just behind me. Curiosity quickly got the better of me, and I crawled toward the tree. I wondered if someone had seen me and decided to try to take me out, or if they were aiming at something else and I was just caught in the crossfire. Talk about unfriendly warning shots. There was still enough light to see the tree and where the bullet had embedded in the wood. I found a jagged piece of stone on the ground and began chipping around the hole, and soon had the whole bullet out. Only it wasn't your usual bullet shape. Even after penetrating the tree and being considerably squashed, this was a small, heavy metal ball, about the size of a small marble. It was a musket ball. Okay, that told me the time was way back when. Not as far back as Roanoke by any means, but sometime in the 19th century, possibly even the American Civil War.
You got all that from a musket ball?
Of course.
Let me guess, honey. It's one of your oh-so-healthy hobbies/obsessions.
How did you guess?
Really?
Yeah, it started with Bernard Cornwell. He's a British author.
Yeah, I've read him. He did these great sailing thrillers. Loads of fun.
Well, he's more well known for his Richard Sharp series set during the Napoleonic Wars. Sharp is this guy who started out as an orphan, like Oliver Twist, with no hope for anything, then joined the army and turns out to be really great at killing people. There's like over 20 books, and through the series he gets promoted. But anyway, in each of the books Cornwell goes into detail about the musket, as well as the rifle later on, with the 8 grooves that help spin the musket ball and make it more accurate. So before I bore you all to death, I'll just say I've learned a lot about muskets and rifles and these little 9-ounce balls. They were also used in the US during the Civil War. So it didn't take me long to realize that's what I was holding in the palm of my hand. Even though these were primitive weapons by our modern gun standards, they were still plenty deadly and killed a lot of people throughout history. Sharp got hit by a musket ball a number of times, and the graphic detail of his suffering made it clear I didn't want to be taking any risks. Especially since medical help during this time was not something I would wish on my worst enemy.
Even the other Jake Fisher?
Yes, even him. Back to the battle. Naturally, all these thoughts occurred to me in a few seconds, and I hunkered down as low as I could, crawling around the trunk of the tree and seeking the best cover I could find. Then I got my feet under me and got back to a standing position, using the wide tree as my protection. A crazy idea occurred to me as I looked up at those thick, heavy branches. I started climbing precariously at first and even slipped a little. I thought I was going to fall right into the line of fire. And yes, Monica, before you say anything, I know this was reckless, but you know how it is when I get an idea in my head.
You can't fucking let it go.
Exactly, but I made it up the first layer of branches with only a few hiccups. But that was still only 6 feet off the ground. I needed to be sure, so I went up a few more branch levels, or brevels, if you will.
I won't. Disallowed.
Fair enough. I found the right sturdy branch and slowly inched myself out onto the near end, but stayed far enough back before it started bending. may take risks sometimes, but I'm not stupid.
Jury's still out on that.
Ouch.
Although you're here now, so I guess you managed to pull through somehow.
Thanks for the resounding encouragement. But my whole reason for doing this death-defying effort was to give me a better and much safer view of the battle going on below. It totally worked. From up here, I could see that there weren't that many men on each side, maybe 50 or so. It was really more of a skirmish than a battle, I'd say. But still, absolutely fascinating to watch in the flesh, or in the non-corporeal ether, or whatever hell state I was in at that point. I could see each side and even what the men were wearing. It's important who's on your side and who's the enemy when you're firing blindly into all the smoke and noise, so your uniform is important. Johnny Red of the Confederates was decked out in a light gray garb with that square-shaped hat, while the Union soldier Billy Yank wore the darker, distinctive blue, so one could do their best to avoid friendly fire. But with the light fading fast, it was already pretty hard for me to see the men clearly among the foliage. So, can't imagine what it must have been like down on the ground with the gunshots and all the smoke and the waning light. You generally want to avoid a fight at night for exactly this reason.
And that goes for any kind of fight.
Very true.
Shortly after, both sides stopped shooting. There was no point. You might randomly hit the enemy, but you were also just as likely to hit one of your own men. It would just be wasted ammo, which wasn't exactly a limitless supply for these guys. But that's when I heard the sound. I hadn't heard it since the earlier time in the Ostium network, but I recognized it right away, without question. It meant a door had been opened into this world from the Ostium network. But it was too dark to see, so I just hung on up in the tree trying to make out any detail I could below. It's pretty fruitless. I couldn't see a damn thing, and what I thought I could see was just my imagination playing tricks on me. What definitely wasn't a trick of my imagination were those screams. They turned my blood cold. I wanted to jump down and help them. Maybe I'd land on someone and find out right away what was going on. But I was also terrified. I don't know what was out there, what that something was doing to those men. And I didn't really want to find out. Like I said, I take risks, but only ones where I know I have a fighting chance of coming out alive. I didn't know what happened to them, but this silence made me want the screams to come back. As it stretched on, it became a lot worse. I wanted out of here, and fast. But I wasn't feeling anything pulling me back like it had on the planet with the winged beings. So I decided to take matters into my own hands, like I've done previously with Ostium. I pictured in my mind that tunnel again, where I'd come from, and I imagined whatever it was that caused that pulling sensation, something invisible but tangible, which could affect change. And I imagined it reaching out to me and taking hold of me and pulling me back. And then it happened. I was going back, away from this creepy-ass place and back to the Ostium network. But it wasn't fast enough for me, so I increased the throttle and zipped out there like nobody's business.
Bloody hell. How did that make you feel?
It made me feel strong, powerful, and like I'd just added another arrow to my quiver.
Your what?
My quiver.
What the hell is that?
Something you put arrows in.
I'm pretty sure that's not what it's called.
I'm serious, it's called a quiver.
Sounds like something you'd write with.
No, that's a quill.
Well, now I know you're making shit up.
What?
Jake.
Are you kidding me?
Jake.
What is it, Zhang?
Monica is fucking with you.
God damn it. You got me again.
You're pretty easy to get, Jake, I have to admit.
I guess. I think Monica's just really good at it. She sells it so well.
I really do, don't I?
Shall we continue on to your next port of call?
Yeah, I guess. The next artifact to jump out at me was a small polar bear we got from Angie Cooney. At first I thought I was back there in Angie Cooney because it was cold, damn cold. I mentally prepared to freeze my ass off, but was surprised to find the inclement weather had no effect on me. I didn't feel cold, but Then I didn't feel hot either. Didn't really feel anything, which was just fine by me. After looking for those specialized huts and not seeing any, I decided this wasn't Anjakuni. Also, there was the fact that the bright shining sun in the sky had more of an orange color to it, less the strong, vibrant yellow I'm used to from Sol. This told me whatever galaxy I was in whatever pocket of the universe, this star had burned through a lot more of its hydrogen and was getting closer to its eventual end. And then there was that. I definitely wasn't on Earth this time. It was a polar bear bonanza. Of course I can say that now, knowing I wouldn't be shortly ripped to shreds by these magnificent beasts and devoured. There must have been more than 100 of them. They were similar to Arctic polar bears, but also not at the same time. Some were the same size, others even bigger, and 1 or 2 were twice the size. So we're talking like approaching elephant size. Pretty scary stuff. But it was about then I realized they weren't paying any attention to me, even though it felt like I was standing only 10 feet away. That's because I wasn't really there. To them, at least. I was, for all intents and purposes, invisible to them in my incorporeal state. Meaning for each of the trips I'd taken through these artifacts, I'd never been in any danger of being seen. After that, my heart rate quickly returned to normal, and I was able to study these amazing animals from another planet in more detail. It wasn't just their size that made them seem different from earthly polar bears. Some of them had a more creamy or yellow-colored fur. Their ears were larger and pointed like a dog's. Their paws were also different. The leg looked normal, a thick trunk, but ended in a paw that was flat and spread out wider than the rest of the leg. It reminded me a little of a snowshoe, so my assumption was that they evolved these feet for the specific terrain they lived on. Maybe here the snow had a different composition. Was it more slushy, perhaps? Maybe it was harder to walk on with smaller feet, so they had evolved these snowshoe feet. I realized I could test my theory since I was invisible to them, but still had a tactile connection to this world. I looked down at my feet, which were standing on the snowy ground, and I saw it wasn't like when one normally walks through snow. There's the crunch and sinking into the frozen water, which can be shallow or deep depending on how thick the snow is and how deep it goes. But it looked like I was just standing on top of the snow and not sinking into it, just like Legolas does when he shows off for the rest of the Fellowship when they're attempting to scale Caradhras.
Nerd alert!
You're also the nerd for getting the reference, which I didn't explain.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I've tried playing the nerd card beforehand and it doesn't really work. Because we're all nerds here.
A fellowship of the nerds, if you will.
Well played, Zhang.
Anyway, we get your long-winded point, Jake.
Thanks. So to test my hypothesis, I started walking and immediately sank down up to my knees. And I kept sinking, like it was quicksand. I actually started panicking. Okay, fine, I couldn't be seen by anyone or anything here in this realm, but that didn't mean the natural environment couldn't still kill me. Maybe it could, maybe it couldn't. But I didn't really want to confirm that theory one way or another. I tried to keep calm and concentrated. I imagined myself rising up out of the snow and just standing on top of it, thinking of that light-footed elf. Then I opened my eyes and let out a deep breath. It worked, and I wasn't going to be drowned in slush, thankfully. So my theory had been proved, and this likely explained why all these polar bears had such large feet. It might also mean this whole planet was covered in this slushy snow that might have an entire ocean underneath it. The weaker sun could even be the reason for this. There was less heat coming from it, making the planet colder and causing this slush snow to be a permanent formation. So now that I'd established I could float on the snow and slush and whatever surface I wanted to, I guess, and not be seen while doing it, I turned my focus back to La Bear Polar.
What the fuck is that?
You mean you haven't heard of Le Bear Polar?
I get it. It's a stupid polar bear in stupid French. Is that supposed to mean something?
I take it you're not familiar with the fantastic radio show Cabin Pressure?
Never fucking heard of it.
How about you, Steve?
Sorry, mate. Not ringing any bells.
Okay, strike two. How about you, Zhang?
A British comedy radio show that ran from the 2nd of July 2008 to the 24th of December 2014 about an airline named MJN Air that only featured one airplane nicknamed Gertie. There were 4 series with a 2010 Christmas Day special episode, and the show's finale, entitled Zurich, which was a 2-part special. Each episode was named after an airport and intended for release in alphabetical order. However, Series 2 and 3 were originally broadcast out of order.
Okay, that's enough, Zhang. Thanks. I didn't really need the wiki on it, though the show did feature a young Benedict Cumberbatch before he was a big celebrity.
Did you just say Benedict Cumberbatch?
I did.
Oh, that can't be a real fucking name.
It is.
I've got to admit, Jake, even to me that sounds pretty farcical. Like something in a carry-on film.
It's true, I promise. And don't even get me started on what his fans were called.
Dare I ask?
Okay, you asked for it. Cumber bitches.
Bloody hell.
Jesus.
I warned you. Anyway, in one episode, Martin, voiced by one Benedict Cumberbatch, he jokingly referred to a polar bear as Le Bear Polar. And now this joke has become such a drawn-out mess that I regret even mentioning it. Let's just get back to the polar bears. I already explained how they didn't look like your ordinary polar bears, but it was how they were congregating with each other. I know it's a strange word to use to describe bears, but that's the one that feels right. With the grunts and growls and various bear sounds, they were clearly communicating with each other. And not just simple one-word nouns and objects, but complex sentences. They looked at each other with such depth and concentration that it was obvious they were conversing, and even discussing subjects with each other about who knows what, but this was a species that was clearly evolved way beyond the normal polar bears we know of. I couldn't help thinking of Yorick Bernson from his Dark Materials by Philip Pullman.
Okay, now that reference I got.
Yeah, me too. Love those books.
Good, it was like the town with the polar bears being able to talk with each other, though they weren't wearing armor or anything. And again, I had no clue what they were saying to each other, but it was just amazing to watch and kind of peaceful. They all seemed so patient and polite with each other. I could have watched for hours, but that's when... This time it was bright day, and I saw the rupture in space and time appear suddenly, and it was huge. It had to be at least 20 feet high. Not like the doors I've created before. This was a big, long, jagged tear through reality. It was ripped open further by whomever was on the other side. It didn't take me long to find out. They came through one by one, 8 of them, and I could tell they were Ostium Network security with their matching uniforms.
Like those who visit us in Ostium.
Exactly like them. Only they had futuristic-looking weapons and special helmets that were presumably giving them oxygen to breathe in this alien atmosphere. They charged in, and as soon as they saw the polar bears, they opened fire with their weapons. They may have been alien creatures, but they could be hurt like anything without protection on Earth. The blood of these polar bears was a dark blue, and it ran like an inky river. And the sounds were just horrible. They weren't immediately defeated. While they had seemed so quiet and calm before, some of their number began to die. They erupted in anger and determination. They attacked with a ferocity that scared me. I'd never seen an animal become so vicious and bloodthirsty. It didn't take long, and soon the guards began to fall. In less than a few minutes, there were only 2 of them left. One sacrificed himself so the other, a woman I think, could make it back through the rip and survive. The rip quickly sealed up and she was gone. Then there were just bodies left. I thought the bears might take out their revenge on the corpses or even eat them or something, but they didn't. They walked away, ignoring them, and turned to their own victims. 6 of their group had been murdered. They carefully picked each of them up, sometimes 2 bears to 1 dead one, carried or dragged them away from the place of death and destruction. I could feel the pull beginning to take me to the map table, but I needed to know what they were doing with their dead. I made myself float along the snow following them. The pull grew stronger. I tried my best to thwart it, but it had little effect. As I was slowly pulled away, I watched the bears put down their fallen brethren and begin to dig holes into the slush and snow. Deep holes. As the darkness closed around me, I realized what they were doing. They were burying them, digging graves for their dead.
That's almost unbelievable and incredibly sad.
I was ready to leave at that point, just wanting to get out of there. As that force pulled me back, I not only let it, but used my abilities to speed my journey back to the map table.
I'm sorry, Jake. It must have been really hard to see.
It was. It was harder because they weren't human. They weren't like us. They didn't deserve that at all. They were this unique species on another planet, and then people came and blew the shit out of them, like they always do.
Not just any people.
Yeah, Steve's right. It wasn't just any fucking people. It was those goddamn ones from the Ostium Network. The ones who pride themselves on fucking shit up and hurting people in the process. Just like they've been doing since the beginning.
After you hear everything I have to say, that fact is gonna hit even harder.
So what artifact did you go with next?
At this point, they were all starting to fade, and I took it as a sign that my strange and mysterious journey was coming close to ending. There were only 2 left, so I chose the closest one, a shiny hunk of gold with incredible design work on it that I got from the 2 British guys, Kane and Fields. As I said, like Holmes and Watson, only for the paranormal.
Very cool.
They were. And they let me have this artifact, which apparently is kind of priceless. Sutton Hoo, I think they said.
As in the medieval hoard known as the Sutton Hoo treasure from the British Museum?
I guess so.
Yeah, priceless.
Okay, well, that was the one I chose next and went down that familiar dark tunnel for the penultimate time. And I found myself in some old Viking town. At least it looked somewhere in Scandinavia to me. I guess it could have been that place in North America where they think the Vikings might have first landed.
Vinland.
How do you know that? Plus the Sutton Hoo stuff.
What? Jake has to be the fucking professor with everything? Can't a girl know some shit too?
Yes, of course. I just didn't expect one of your specialties to be the Middle Ages.
Well, I liked reading about it when I was younger. Took a few extra credit courses in college, too. They were fun and interesting. Plus, there was some pretty gnarly architecture and building going on at the time.
I'd say I'm impressed, but I think you might punch me.
And you would be right. So watch it, Buster.
Will do. I just got the vibe from how everyone looked and what they were wearing and the language they were speaking, which I obviously couldn't understand a word of. I'm not going to lie, it kind of felt like some Norse god because I was hovering over the town. It was pretty discombobulating to start with, but once I realized I wasn't going to drop out of the sky and slam into the ground and kill myself, I slowly got hold of my fear and forced myself to calm down. It was kind of fun watching everyone going about their business. It looked like a bustling town with lots of goods being exchanged and everyone, for the most part, working in a sort of harmony. I heard a certain word repeated a number of times. Burka, I think it was. That might have been the name of the town. There was a good, solid wall built around it, ensuring it could be protected from any invading armies or whatever else might be thrown at them. That is, except for
what actually happened next.
Take your time, mate.
Thanks. But I'd rather get through as much of this as I can and get it over with. Nothing seemed to happen for quite some time, and I wondered if I was there just to enjoy the scenery, which I had no problem doing. And then... like before, it came out of nowhere, only it was much larger this time. The rip in the fabric of reality was so much more than a rip. It was a sundering, fucking vertical earthquake through the sky. It looked like it might stretch for over a mile, and it went deep into the ground also. The ground rent apart most of the north side of the wall, which fell straight into this giant hole that opened up. A vertical maw that took a good chunk of the town into it, and many lives. The opening of the rift caused a shock wave that rippled through the rest of the town, and it was like the ripple you see in those atom bomb tests, along with the same devastating effects. The buildings were just demolished, reduced to rubble like they were nothing more than sticks and hay and not good solid mud, brick, and stone. This was the ultimate big bad wolf, and the people were the helpless pigs with no solid, strong house to hide in. They were all killed. Every fucking one of them. I waited for everything to settle. It took a long time to see if there was any movement, any sign of life. There was nothing. As for the rip, it just hung like the world's greatest fucking mistake. I waited longer to see if anyone would come through. It wouldn't be hard. So fucking huge. Plenty of room. But no one did. And then... just closed up like it had never been. I suppose it was quieter than when it opened through this reality because the damage had already been done. Healing it was a quieter affair. The silence was palpable. Nothing. No movement. No life whatsoever. Anywhere. And that was the way it would stay for who knows how long. Years. Decades. Centuries, perhaps. And no one would ever know what happened here.
Except for those at the Ostium Network who did it.
Yes, except for them. And for us. We know. When I felt like I could go on, I brought myself back along as fast as I could go, wanting to get to that last artifact and end this whole fucking charade once and for all. The final artifact was the eyeball, the one we picked up.
Ugh, at that fucked up house with all the corpses.
Yes.
But that place isn't like that anymore, remember? You saved them, Jake, and it never happened, right?
Yeah, Steve, you're correct. Maybe that explains why the eyeball wasn't covered in blood like it was when I picked it up off the floor in that horrible room.
Or perhaps the map table comes inclusive with a nifty cleaning service? Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to lighten the mood a bit.
I appreciate it, Steve. It was kind of funny.
A little. Just a little bit funny. That's all you're getting.
Fine, then.
I found it amusing, Steve.
Thanks, Zhang. Glad to know someone's on my side.
Anyway, I went down that tunnel for what I thought was the last time and found myself in a rocky terrain that just felt like it was really long ago. Like tens of thousands of years in the past. Maybe even hundreds of thousands. The rocks looked like rocks. Rocky outcroppings. Nothing special there. But all the plant life around me looked different. Like nothing I'd really seen before. But still a little familiar. And the sun and the sky and the surrounding terrain pretty much convinced me I was still on Earth. I heard movement in a cave and decided to investigate, since I knew I couldn't be seen. I went inside and heard... I don't know what species of hominid he was, but he was hunched over and sort of walking and dragging himself along. I also knew it was a he because he was naked and very clearly male. I wondered if he was going back to his own people in the cave. Would there be others inside like him? Maybe his family? If you could call it that. His community, perhaps. Although I couldn't hear anyone else. I expected it to get darker, but it soon started getting lighter, and I realized the tunnel led to an opening where there was sunlight streaming down. Once the man was through, I soon joined him in the opening, which was just gorgeous with its lush vegetation. It looked like a very comfortable place to call home. The hominid reached behind a bush and drew out some sort of animal skin. Then from another place he picked up a piece of rock that had a sharp edge and started scraping away on the inside of the fur that still had gristle and meat from the animal it had originally belonged to. Like the Viking town, this was also kind of peaceful and enjoyable to watch in its own way. I mean, paleontologists and anthropologists just get to theorize about all this stuff with the evidence they're able to find, whereas I got to experience it firsthand, in the flesh, so to speak.
That was fucking terrible.
Yeah, I know, but I couldn't resist.
And you never can.
Yeah, I guess you're right. It wasn't much of a rip this time. Small, but enough to let someone through. A single someone. He stepped through cautiously, like he didn't know what he was doing, and then I saw his face in an older and different man. It was the other Jake Fisher, and he'd just come through an ostium he had made. The hominid stopped what he was doing, as he had seen this stranger come through into his world. He couldn't begin to comprehend what had happened, but he knew it wasn't right. He slowly stood, holding on tight to the sharp rock, which had now become a weapon. Other Jake checked himself all over, as if to make sure he wasn't missing any pieces of clothing or body parts. I think this might have been his first time ever coming through an ostium. When I heard the sound, I had instinctively ducked back into the tunnel, even though I was out of harm's way no matter where I stood. Other Jake looked up and saw the hominid and tilted his head like a confused dog. But the expression he wore was one of disappointment. Guess he had expected something better or wanted to arrive somewhere more interesting than here with this primitive man. Nevertheless, he confidently reached into the pocket of his pants and withdrew a familiar small pistol. He pointed it at the hominid. It didn't kill him. Other Jake had intentionally hit the man in the stomach. He would die, slowly, and in a lot of pain. Other Jake walked up to him like he was a piece of trash and from his other pants pocket took out some sort of electrical device. It looked a little like the handheld PCIII meter from Ghostbusters, only bigger and heavier. Other Jake reached out with the machine, which had 2 clawish prongs, almost like horns, and brought it close to the man's chest. Then he stood there and waited as the man bled to death. It took 8 minutes. I counted every second. After the man died, Other Jake stood up and turned off the machine. Then he glanced at the tunnel where I was standing. He fucking saw me. As soon as I saw his expression, I turned and ran back down the tunnel as fast as I could, and then I willed the pull to come to me and sweep me away. It did without question, and I found myself back at the map table, feeling like I was about to have a heart attack.
He really fucking saw you?
Yes,
You're absolutely sure?
without question.
Then we've got a big fucking problem on our hands.
Why are we in trouble, Monica?
Why are we in trouble? Are you fucking kidding me, Jake?
It's him! Fucking Evil Jake! Whatever the hell you want to call him. And now he's seen you.
It was going to happen eventually.
How are you so bloody calm, Jake?
Because of everything I've been through. Because of everything we've been through.
But this isn't some random guy in Ostium, or the Ostium Network, or whatever. This is the other Jake, the asshole Jake, the bastard Jake, the one who's been running this whole fucking show. Who still is, for all we know.
It's not a big deal.
Not a big deal? Zhang, who created the Ostium Network?
The other Jake Fisher.
Who's been in control of just about everyone from the beginning?
The other Jake Fisher.
Is this other Jake still in control of the Ostium Network?
I do not believe so. I do not sense his presence through any of my possible and potential tangents.
Well, I don't really know what that means, but I'll take your word for it. Where is he now?
I do not know.
See? He could be anywhere. And any when. We're fucked. Period.
I still don't think it's that big of a deal.
Okay, Jake. Let me play devil's advocate for a moment. Why don't you think it's that big of a deal, and why are you so fucking calm?
Okay. Yes, he saw me. He recognized me. I can acknowledge that's kind of a big deal.
Kind of?
Hang on, Monica. Just hear me out. He saw me, but he didn't see me at the same time I saw him.
Now, what the fuck does that mean exactly?
Remember the size of the ostium he created? It was small, barely anything. Just enough to get one person through. Him. All the other places I'd been to up till this point had been later or much later on, when the Ostium Network was this big up-and-running machine and could create ostiums of all sizes and ramifications. But I never saw him, only the people he sent through to do his dirty work. This was one of the very early times, possibly his first time ever going through an ostium. Like I said, he was shocked to be there where he was, taking it all in like it was completely novel to him, because it was. But once he got comfortable, he still knew what he was there for, what he needed to do, to make him or the Ostium Network stronger, and he did it without question. He sucked the fear and terror out of that hominid until there was nothing left, and he stored it in that containment device.
Hang on a bloody minute. Do you really think that's what he did? Are you positive?
Absolutely, without question. I was watching his every move from the moment he arrived.
But that would mean...
It would mean he really is the fucking evil villain we've all kind of thought he was from the beginning.
Yeah, what Mum said.
And how long has he been doing this? We don't know. Zhang probably has a rough idea, but what about since he's been gone? We know for a fact that's been at least 10 years, remember? That first entry on Monica's data pad she looked at, it was from more than a decade ago. The time's all relative, right? 10 years for us, or for this Ostium Network, could be a lot longer for that time-traveling prick.
I don't think I've heard you use that word before, Jake. I'm kind of impressed.
He fucking deserves it.
While I'm not one for profanity, I would tend to agree in this instance.
Okay, Zhang. I officially love you.
Thank you, Monica.
Right. So you know what other Jake was doing there, and honestly, hearing you share your absolute confidence in what he was doing, I don't really see how this doesn't terrify you more. I mean, it makes me want to make an emergency trip to the loo just thinking about it.
Because he hasn't been back here in a long time. Because we've faced some scary shit already and lived through it. We thought we were going to get killed by that crone, and instead we saved Thyra from the hell she was living in and gave her a second chance. We've all been through so much, and we've only become stronger for it. And before you say anything, Monica, tell me this isn't true. I'm tied to Ostium in a big fucking way that's got to count for something.
Okay, Jake, I can't deny that.
And not only me. You're tied to Ostium too, Monica. So are you, Steve. We've all had things happen to you that shows Ostium has helped you, that Ostium is on your side.
Okay, Jake, that does make me feel a little bit better.
And there's also what happened next to me in the map table.
That wasn't all of it?
Oh no, not by a long shot. What happened to me next? Well, let's just say it changed me. Once again, and for the better. I'd say this time I didn't just level up, but entered a whole new class.
Hang on. Let's fill our coffee cups first. Okay, we're ready now. You may begin.
Thank you, and be sure to hold on to your buds. Once I was back at the map table, I felt different somehow. After seeing him, other Jake, and seeing what he did. Fully understanding for the first time what he wants, what the Ostium Network's true goal is, benefiting off the suffering of others. It pissed me off. I came back to the map table mad as hell, and I wasn't going to take it anymore. I took a deep breath and focused my mind solely on the map table and all the numbers, all the artifacts, and took in all the potentialities and realities that were possible. It wasn't easy. I didn't do it for long, and then I remembered something. A certain strange museum with a specific display that left me, well, kind of unhinged. Then I let it all go. The weight, the pressure, all those doors, and honed in on the number 2 and let whatever powers that be in the Ostium Network take me there. I was back in my old haunt, so to speak, but this time it was different. Before me was the lost colony of Roanoke, only they weren't lost. They were right there, living out their daily lives, enjoying this new world. I could see a boat of native people arriving at the island and being welcomed by the white settlers. It was clear this wasn't their first time visiting the newcomers. Goods were being exchanged for food, it seemed. It all looked, well, like one imagined and hoped it would be with new people arriving on these new shores. If only it had continued that way. But that was when things changed, and not for the better. It was a massive thing, like the one that was ripped open in the world with the polar bears. Unlike before, this time a lot of people came out. It was like a freaking army arriving, a whole battalion or something. There were over 50 of them at least. I was just as shocked as all the people there who stood mute, not knowing what to do. I really hoped they weren't gonna just open fire and slaughter everyone. I watched and waited, and the tension was intense. But they didn't shoot. They had the weapons. In fact, they were decked out in full tactical gear and looked like a cross between astronaut suits and a SWAT team's getup. But as funny as they looked, they knew exactly what they were doing. They had a plan, but I had no clue what it was. So I just watched as they kept marching. There were more of them coming through now, over 100 at least. It seemed like they were headed toward the other side of the island. I did my levitating thing and rose a good 50 feet into the air so I could get a bird's eye view of what was going on. And yep, they'd split into 2 lines and were encircling the whole island. But why? Were they going for some sort of massive firing squad? It didn't make any sense. There weren't that many people to assassinate, plus the hamlet was at one end of the island. The rest was dense forest, as I well knew from having opened the ostium into it so many times before.
so there had to be another reason for them surrounding the entire island with Ostium Network personnel. It was definitely eerie, with all of them just standing there. The people of Roanoke hadn't moved either, just continued to stare, not wanting to risk a move for fear of what might happen. And just when it seemed like one of the men in the colony was going to snap and do something, it was a bright flash, and for just the barest of seconds it seemed like the island was gone, leaving just empty water. Then it was back like magic. Only there was a big noticeable difference. The island was empty, devoid. No people from the colony, and no people from the Ostium Network.
Wait a bloody second. They were gone?
Yes.
All of them?
Yep. Not a soul left behind of either group.
So what did you do?
Well, I didn't have much of a choice. I went after them. I didn't have long, a few seconds. I saw the giant ostium starting to close up, quickly, so I just reacted on impulse. I forced the ostium powers that be to move me straight toward it as fast as humanly, or ethereally possible in this case. In the blink of an eye, I was at the ostium and then through it. On the other side was Roanoke, the island, just like the one I had left. Identical, in fact, except that this one had all the people on it that had disappeared, both the settlers and the personnel of the Ostium Network. Every new sight came as a complete shock to me now, and I just didn't have any time to stop and think things over like I usually like to do. I just had to act and react. I came down to the ground in front of one of the Ostium Network guards, and he clearly saw me, as well as my flying act, judging by the look on his face. Then he saw who I was, or more importantly, who I looked like.
Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was you, sir. We've done as you ordered. Roanoke's been brought through as you demanded. Went off without a hitch, just like you said it would. Is that why you're here? To see?
Again, I just had seconds to do what my gut told me, and I went with it. You, shut the fuck up, whatever your name is. You've all really fucked this up this time. Who the hell is in charge here?
Sorry, sir. Commander Haynes.
And where the fuck is he?
She, sir. She is over there.
Fucking typical. You really screwed the fucking pooch this time, Haynes.
I have, sir? My apologies. I did as you ordered.
Fuck you did. It's all gone fucking foobar. I just got the report. We need to put it all back. Right the fuck now.
But sir, you said...
I don't care what the fuck you thought I said. I just told you what you need to fucking do, so fucking do it.
Yes, sir. Right away, sir.
Clean this shit up. I don't want to have to deal with this longer than I need to. And keep that fucking ostium open.
Ostium, sir?
The fucking door. What the fuck are you waiting for? Put it all back already. I turned around and started heading into the forest, trying my best to get away from everyone as fast as I could. I didn't know if I was convincing enough, if this was going to work at all, or if I'd just blown my one chance and the shit was really about to hit the fan. But I wasn't going to wait and find out. Once I was far enough away from everyone, I made myself rise into the air quickly. The ostium was staying open and was actually widening back to its former size. Again, I used all the speed I had to shoot through. So far, I knew how to manipulate and control whatever the map table was doing from the other side. But being on this side of the Ostium Network, whatever dimension it might be in, I didn't want to take any risks and potentially get stuck here for who knows how long. Especially if this Ostium Network's employees were able to see me for the fraud I was. Once on the other side, I just hovered in the air and waited, hoping and hoping. Just hoping it would work. And then...
That bright light again, and the island switched around, like some corner card shark doing the Dixie Cup game where there's a ball under one of them and you have to guess which one. Only this time, it was human lives under the Dixie Cup. The people of Roanoke, which I had in my hands. But there they were. They were all back, still all looking pretty stunned because they had no idea what had just happened to them. The Ostium Network guards were jogging. No, running as fast as they could back through the Ostium, which was now closing up. Guessing I managed to scare the shit out of them. And a few moments later, I couldn't believe it had actually worked. But the Ostium Network was gone, and the Roanoke settlers below me were now safe. After a few minutes of being too afraid to move, they finally did, holding and hugging each other over the trauma they had just gone through. I knew it was going to take a little while for them all to gain back their confidence, but they'd soon get there. Things would return to normal. And then I got a deep, sinking feeling in me. The same feeling Doc Brown must have experienced when he realized he had just changed the course of history. Along this tangent, at least, I had just changed things so the Ostium Network never made the people of Roanoke disappear and perhaps changed the legend for all time. But I was also thinking something, remembering how everyone is now pretty sure the settlers at Roanoke very likely just left the island and joined up with the Native American people. Were my actions to save them after everything they had just gone through? Was that the trigger mechanism that made them realize it was too messed up on Roanoke and they needed to leave? I didn't really have time to wait and find out because even though I had made myself come here, the Ostium Network was pulling me back. At the very least, this apparent solution I had caused fit with the legend, but I couldn't help wondering as I traveled back to the map table if I'd been able to do something else, perhaps intervene earlier, if it could have changed events in some other way. Permanently changed the legend, perhaps? I would never know. I didn't give myself time to get comfortable once I was back at the map table, because I knew exactly where I wanted to go next. 38 degrees, 20 minutes north, and 17 degrees, 15 minutes west. I didn't bother with the number or the spot on the map table this time. I just closed my eyes and imagined in my head exactly where I wanted to be, where I wanted to go. I felt movement, air rushing past me, and then nothing but silence at first, so I just waited. Then I opened my eyes and I saw exactly where I wanted to be, the Mary Celeste. Looks like I arrived at the right time too, before the mysterious disappearance of the entire crew. They were going about whatever one does to keep a big old boat like this in ship shape. There was plenty of canvas showing, but the boat barely seemed to be moving. I guess that was normal for old ships like these, before engines or even steam could make them go considerably faster. I kept my distance, like in Roanoke, knowing I couldn't be spotted by anyone, but still wanting to know more. Although I made sure I wasn't too far so I wouldn't miss whatever unexplained event was about to happen. I also had to keep on my toes, so to speak, for whatever sort of entrance the Ostium Network had planned this time, and however they intended to make the people on the Mary Celeste permanently disappear. What the hell was that? I saw the massive flash rip through part of the boat. I didn't see any smoke yet, or fire, but that didn't mean below decks there wasn't a giant conflagration growing. I mean, the whole ship is made of wood. Plus there's probably plenty of alcohol aboard, and no doubt gunpowder somewhere too. Is that what just exploded?
Abandon ship! Every man for himself!
They're getting the lifeboat ready. Can't risk waiting too long going down with the ship.
They need to get what supplies they can and get to safety while they can. Once the Mary Celeste starts taking on water, it can go down real fast and suck everyone nearby down too, in a vast whirlpool. They're working real fast. It's pretty impressive. They must have practiced for this exact situation. But wait a minute. The Mary Celeste never sank. It stayed perfectly afloat with no issues, only no one aboard. I know. I was there. I mean, here. Is this some crazy plan hatched by evil me? Some way to get the crew away from the boat so they can be captured more easily? It doesn't really make any sense. They're rowing fast and hard, keeping together as a group. They know where they're headed to. If a boat doesn't find them by nightfall, it won't take them too long to make it to land. Plus, they have supplies with them. They can last a few days. But what about the ship? The explosion scared the crap out of me, just like it did the whole crew. But now, there's no smoke, no fire. I can't see any indication there was even an explosion. What the hell? Oh, wait, just a goddamn minute. What was that article I read from 2006? They did an experiment to recreate the events of the Mary Celeste. I totally forgot about it. About some scientists from University College London. I think they even filmed a documentary about it, though I didn't see it. The theory was the explosion could have been caused by alcohol leaking from the ship's cargo. But that would have led to scorching and burnt wood, it was thought. But when the experiment was carried out in a model of the holds of the Mary Celeste, there was a considerable explosion that ripped through the holds, but that was it. Nothing burned or caught fire. There were no scorch marks at all. But it still would have terrified the crew, possibly prompting the captain to make the call to abandon ship. They couldn't be 100% sure, but it seemed a very plausible explanation, they decided. Wow. I forgot I read that article. It just seemed hard to believe at the time, but seeing it now, and hearing now, seems more than likely. And the crew of the Mary Celeste? Guess they made it to safety, and that bit of history got kind of lost.
So let me get this straight. This was just a what? A freak accident?
I guess so.
And the crew just abandoned ship, fearing for their lives when they could have just stayed and been completely safe?
Correct.
And the involvement of the Ostium network?
There wasn't any, at least as far as I could tell. It's just one of those stories that's been twisted and conflated so much over time that the easy and completely understandable truth has been lost. To time.
Did you really need to say that?
You know I did.
So I guess this time the Ostium network wasn't that bad then.
Oh, don't worry, hun. They're plenty fucking bad to make up for this moment.
Guess you're right, Mum. I still find it hard to believe, though.
Tell me about it. I waited there for quite a while, just to make sure I hadn't missed anything. To make sure nothing else was going to happen. It ended up being long enough that I saw both Monica and another me show up. And that's when I hightailed it out of there.
Smart move.
Wouldn't want to cross the streams.
Exactly.
So, why did we end up there in the first place, if it didn't even involve the Ostium network?
I don't really know. It's a mystery. Something that Ostium thought we needed to investigate, I guess.
I don't think that would be admissible in court, but I guess we'll move on. So where did you head next?
I had some unfinished business with the town of Avalon on the island of Catalina. I arrived, and it was just a beautiful summer's day on Catalina. Blue skies as far as the eye could see, not a wisp of white cloud to be found, and a hot sun beating down on you. The kind of day where the last place you want to be is inside. There were plenty of people out and about, enjoying the sun, the sea, air, and the wonderful seaside town of Avalon. It was a time and a place where it felt like nothing could go wrong, but I was here for a reason. I was here because I knew something was about to go very wrong. Fortunately, or unfortunately, I'm not sure which it is, I didn't have to wait long. I hadn't picked up on it during any of the other times, but now it was kind of obvious to me. It was the same way they made the whole of Gibraltar disappear in the blink of an eye. Only here it wasn't a case of making the town of Avalon disappear with all the people enjoying its promenades, shops, and locales, but replacing it with an exact facsimile, minus all the people. It was obvious we were now at a point much farther along in the timeline of the Ostium network, where their technology had advanced to a degree they could remove an entire town and replace it exactly down to the street signs and rusty dock stanchions. I also spotted the disturbance right away, a small human-sized ostium opening up on the road below, not too far away from me. A guard of the Ostium network stepped out briefly to make sure everything had gone according to plan, and once that was confirmed, stepped back through and the Ostium closed up. The guard didn't really have to worry about being spotted. There was no one in town to see him, except me, of course. And like usual, I was hovering up above and doing my best to keep out of sight. But I could already see the inhabitants of other parts of the island of Catalina were aware something big had happened, even if they didn't know exactly what. It was like someone had just kicked an ant's nest and there was now a flurry of activity. But they were all pretty far away from the town, at campsites and at the high point of the island where the small airport was. It would take them some time to get here if they wanted to. There was nothing I could do for them at the moment, and nothing to be done with the empty town of Avalon. Plus the other me and Monica would predictably be arriving any moment, and I again really didn't want to be spotted. I had two options, really. To return to the map table with this mystery unsolved, the people lost, or take matters into my own hands, defy Ostium, and get the answers I wanted. I probably don't need to tell anyone here which option I went with. I summoned my thoughts and my will and whatever else it was that I somehow just knew to do automatically, visualized where I wanted to be, and made it happen. And there I was, in some new place in the Ostium network, and there below me was Avalon, only unlike I had ever seen it before. The town was its own complete island now, instead of being part of the much larger one of Catalina. It was tiny, but otherwise appeared to be alive and well, while its inhabitants were the complete opposite. It was understandable. They were all having a really hard time dealing with what had just happened. And then there were the people from the Ostium network. There were a lot of them, in their uniforms, swaggering around like cops with way too much power and not giving a shit about the people they were supposed to be protecting. I watched and felt my gorge and anger rise. I couldn't take this anymore. Watching and doing nothing. Then one of them knocked a woman down with a blow to the head, using some rifle-looking weapon, and drew a device from a pocket, pointing it at her. My breath caught in my throat as I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Was this really going to happen before my eyes? Just like other Jake had done to that helpless hominid? It looked like the other device, but also sleek-looking and efficient. And then it began, and I saw more of them drawing out those devices, and that's when I just completely lost it. I flew down like, well, I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot like Superman with a cape, and landed on that guy, throwing him across the road. The woman quickly scrambled to safety, hobbling along like something was very wrong with her, and others surrounded her protectively. I was fucking livid. Not sure who I needed to do next.
what I even wanted to do with all those guards from the Ostium network. At the very least, I had their attention now. Everyone's, in fact. But that was okay. That was good, in fact. I needed everyone to focus on me, so no one else would get hurt, and I could control what happened next. Even though I didn't really know what I was supposed to do. Like before, I went with my intuition. It wasn't a huge ostium, but big enough for the purpose at hand. You'd be able to fit a bus through, just barely if you needed to, but I didn't have plans of sending any vehicles through the hole, just people. Just employees of the Ostium network, to be specific. I knew I couldn't kill them. That wouldn't be right. But I could send them through the door. Where did it go? I'm sure you're curious. Not a fucking clue. And at that point, I didn't give a shit. And next was the problem of how exactly I was going to send them all through. I could sense I had a couple of options. There was one where I could literally take over their minds and force them through the ostium. I could feel that ability and immense power of possibility flowing through me. But it would take a lot of my energy to do it, and again, I knew it wasn't the right thing to do, even if they all totally fucking deserved it. So I focused on the guy I clobbered. He was still wisely staying on the ground, just watching me. I raised my hand to him, and then realized I didn't even need to do that. I wasn't some ancient hack wizard needing to summon power from the ether. I could just do it with my fucking mind. No movement needed. And in the next moment, he was lifted up off the ground and was being quickly pulled toward the ostium. Once he realized what was happening, he began waving his arms and legs about, trying to break free. In a moment, he was through. I turned to the next guard, 5 of them in fact, and felt the power swell through me. I lifted them all at the same time and sent them through the ostium. I did this 3 more times to varying numbers of Ostium network guards, and then I took a breath and tried to calm myself. I could feel that power continuing to grow within me. I needed to make sure things didn't get out of hand. I took more breaths, and I looked at everyone looking right back at me and spoke to the guards. You've seen what I can do. You know. You can go along quietly through the ostium, or I'll make you. Those are your 2 choices. Make a decision. Most of them started moving right away, knowing it was quite literally out of their hands, and that they needed to cooperate unless they wanted things to turn really bad for them. But there were of course some who thought that they could defy me. They were sent through the ostium before the rest of the walking guards made it. In a relatively short time, there were no longer any members of the Ostium network in this Avalon. I closed up the ostium and then faced another decision with choices. I needed to get all these people back to the real Avalon, or rather the other Avalon that existed on the real Catalina. Maybe I could try moving this whole damn island back there to the right reality somehow. I could feel the power awakening, almost growling within me at the thought of that challenge, but I didn't feel ready for such a feat. It felt beyond me, even if I didn't truly know if it was or not. I did know it was the same Avalon back in the real timeline, which was good enough for me. I opened a new ostium to that place, just as big as the last one, except you could see that sunny, beautiful Avalon on the other side through it. I looked at it and smiled, then looked back at all the people, many of whom had mouths hanging wide open. I couldn't exactly blame them, after everything they had been through and what they'd all just seen. That's the same Avalon you were taken from. I need you all to go back and act like nothing really happened, that everything is back to normal, okay? Because once you go through, it will be. There were nods and a general body language of acceptance, but the next moment was perhaps the biggest. Someone had to go through the ostium first. I waited, dreading having to select and force someone through, but finally, the woman who I had saved separated herself from the people who had been protecting her. She limped toward me with a smile on her face. She gave me a nod. I gave her one back, and then she walked through. We all watched her and could see her on the other side, first waving and then beckoning others to follow. It was like a tsunami of activity, and everyone started moving toward the ostium.
some at a fast pace, some outright running. I watched them all go and couldn't help feeling a sense of elation. When they were all through, I could see the woman who had gone first again, looking back at me. She gave me a final wave, and then I closed up the ostium. I thought about what could be done with this now abandoned Avalon, what I perhaps could do, but decided to leave it as a parting gift for other Jake. When he actually made it here and found out what had happened, he was going to be royally pissed. I headed back to the map table with a big smile on my face. I felt I was on a roll and a whole new kind of high, and I didn't want to slow down. I was saving people and making things right. Finally. My brain was going a light year a second and didn't want to slow down. I didn't want to even entertain the idea of hesitating. Next stop was downtown San Francisco, right outside my old skyscraper of employment, in fact. Well, not really a skyscraper. They don't really have those in the city. Just some tall buildings, the tallest being the Salesforce Tower at 1,070 feet. Nothing to really rival the true skyscrapers of New York City, but I digress. I was back here next to the place I called work for a long time, and it had been a really long time since I had paid a visit. But I could sense an increase in tension and static electricity, a frisson of activity. Basically, shit was about to go down, and for once I was in the right place at the right time. But I knew that because I made sure to be here right at this moment. The Ostium Network was about to strike again and make a whole bunch of people within this city block completely disappear. Plus the city block. And then the other me would eventually show up and be very confused. But not this time. It was time to change events a little, and I'm just going to keep saying time a lot, because ultimately, that's what this is all about, right? I felt it starting, and this time I raised my hands and arms, stretching them out in front of me. Yes, you can probably make a connection to, say, Merlin or even Gandalf at the bridge of Khazad-dûm when he was facing a Balrog or a Morgoth. But I had my reasons. This time I did need a lot of my powers, abilities, magic wandu, whatever you want to call it. And lifting my arms up was definitely helping. I also wanted to keep people away from me, prevent anyone from stepping in my path, potentially knocking me over, or something else that could seriously mess things up. Although seeing some dude with his arms raised in the middle of San Francisco is nothing out of the ordinary, so I expected to be left alone. And then it started, and I just stopped it. It took a lot of energy, a lot out of me. But just as I did what feels like an eon or two ago, when I started holding the blackness at bay, and then eventually being able to just keep it away permanently, here it was about focus combined with ability. I felt it coming. I honed in on the where and knew the when, and just as it began, I was able to take hold of it in its entirety and immediately stop what was about to happen. I didn't even have to push back, really, holding it there in that position, not allowing it to move forward as planned was enough. A few seconds later, it just stopped, ended. Something barely started that would now never happen, and good riddance. The people at the Ostium Network on the other side of all this were probably losing their minds, wondering what exactly had just happened and why it hadn't worked. Okay, as the saying goes, my work here was done. I could have launched myself into the sky, which definitely would have caught some attention, but instead went for the alternate classic superhero move and ducked down an alley and then made myself scarce. I did the same at Fort Bragg, arrived precisely when I meant to, stopped the whole shebang from happening, and then started walking down the beach, trying to get away from people. I ended up at the house. Yes, that house, where I'd seen and experienced so much. where Monica and I had arrived and seen unimaginable horrors that I will never be able to forget. Horrors which, now that the timeline has been changed, never happened and never would happen. But at one point they occurred, and we saw them, and we can never forget that.
You got that fucking right. I really wish I could have those images just sucked right out of my brain.
The Ostium Network doesn't have that specific technology, although those gloves could do a pretty good job, no?
Not that good of a job, as far as I know. How about you? You think you could do it? Reach into my pretty little head and pluck those nasty thoughts right out?
I wouldn't even want to dare try. I've learned a lot. Can do a lot of things now in the Ostium Network I never dreamed of doing before, but something as delicate and dangerous as that, I'm not going to risk it. Not for the one I love.
Good. Because I don't think I would have let you near my noggin if you'd said yes, Jakey.
And then there was the other time I was at the house with Steve and saved all those men, and Thyra in her altered state wasn't able to cause the horror she intended to. And now, with what I've done, this whole series of events is canceled out. It never actually happened. But I still remember them.
As do I, just like they really happened.
Because in one timeline they did, and I can save as many lives as I want, but I guess in some place, in some time, those people will still suffer. Or are we just remembering events that simply never happened?
I don't know, mate. In all the films, those memories just disappear, right?
Yep, but I don't feel any changes happening in that particular mental arena.
Me neither.
For once, everything feels okay upstairs.
So did all these events happen, or not? Which one is it?
I don't think we'll ever know.
Zhang, can you shed any light on this mental conundrum?
Unfortunately, I am unable to. All the events you mentioned are in fact events that transpired, but they are also events that were erased from existence, and therefore technically never occurred. And yet, I have records of them happening, and will do so until I remove them, or they are manually erased. To put it simply, it is a paradox of time.
Oh, that's all. Good. Easy peasy. All done and taken care of with a handy paradox explanation.
Steve, you are being facetious.
I know, I'm sorry, Zhang. It's just my nature, and I'm not exactly satisfied with the explanation, but it is what it is, I suppose.
So was that it, Jake? Back to the map table and then back here?
Oh no, not by a long shot. Now that I knew what I could truly do, I had a couple other catastrophes to prevent from happening. It didn't really matter what order I took on these catastrophes because the key, like before, was simply arriving at the right place at the right time. Much like when we had that infrared map of Ostium in our heads, I could encompass in a way the many timelines and possible tangents of the Ostium network en masse. Sort of like when you look up at the cosmos in the dark of night, get a picture of that sheer mass of stars and planets and worlds and the great wash of the Milky Way. And when I wanted to get to a specific moment, a specific Ostium, I just had to focus and concentrate, and then I could arrive at my destination. I was somewhere in the Democratic Republic of Congo, no clue where, but away from any towns or cities by the look of things, in a dense jungle. But this is where I was needed to be next because someone was about to make an entrance they wanted no one to know about. And there they were. A giant of a man stepped through with a package under his arm, decked out in his protective gear. Nobody would have recognized who he was, but I sure did. I wondered if he was going to keep the Ostium open while he completed his nefarious and despicable deed. But he'd only been here 30 seconds, and it soon closed up. Good. Things were going according to plan. I stepped out from behind the dense bush I'd been hiding behind and snatched the package away from him. I'll take that, thank you. And you'll be going this way now. I opened another Ostium and sent him through before he fully knew what was going on, and closed it up.
Then there was the matter of the package. It was an unmarked case that looked like it was made of some sort of plastic, but was likely some ostium network material, about the size of a lunchbox. And inside, I knew, was some new, evil concoction of the Ebola virus. I couldn't just leave it there. That wasn't an option. And I couldn't easily destroy it. So, what if I opened an ostium to outer space and just tossed it through with just enough momentum to send it headed straight for a star? That should take care of that. And then it was on to our next catastrophe of call. I knew where I was arriving next, but it was still kind of shocking to be on, or rather near, solid ground a moment before, and the next to be on this big-ass tanker somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, south of Britain. But this was where fate had led me. No, not really. It's exactly where I'd led myself. I was above decks toward the front of the massive boat and fully exposed to the elements. The seas were kind of rough with a light showering rain, and I could feel the nautical behemoth swaying from side to side in the considerable ocean swell. Fortunately, I wasn't going to have to spend too long in these taxing conditions before seasickness could start making itself known. And there was the ostium forming not 10 feet from me. It was ready for whoever came through, though the helmet they were wearing made it so I couldn't see the face of the ostium network guard. But that didn't matter to me. Like the last person, they were also carrying something under their arm. This one more of a protective case. I snatched it from them, said thanks, then sent them back through the ostium and promptly closed it up. And that was the end of them and their plan to handicap this tanker and send it to the southern British shores. Well, almost the end. I put the case down on the deck and carefully opened it up. Inside was some sort of explosive device, which had luckily not been activated yet. Phew. I closed up the case, tossed it over the side into the dark ocean, and then went on my wary way through an ostium to the Ukraine. At first, it felt like I was out in the middle of nowhere. Everything looked strange and foreign to me. I didn't really know where I was, but had a feeling it was somewhere in Eastern Europe. And then I saw the familiar wide stacks of the power plant, and that was all I needed. I just had to be ready for whoever was coming through the ostium once it formed. I wasn't sure if they were going to go with the bomb method again or something else. And then there they were, and out stepped a young woman. She wasn't wearing armor or a uniform of any noticeable type. Slacks and a nice blouse, and that was it. She wasn't carrying anything either. She saw me right away, stopping in her tracks. "I'm sorry, but I have to do this. I know why you're here, and I can't let you do that." I closed the ostium and quickly opened a new one as she reached for something. Jesus, that shot almost hit me. Before she could take better aim, I launched her through the ostium and promptly closed it. That was a close one. Too damn close. I took a few breaths and waited for my heart rate to return to its normal pace, and then I readied myself for the final trip. And that's where I'm going to leave my tale for now.
What? Seriously?
Yes, as you said earlier, Steve, Zhang has a part to play in each of our finales, so it only feels right for each of us to get to that point in our telling, and then Zhang can complete this grand retelling.
All right, I suppose.
I'm guessing we're done for the day, or night, rather.
I'm really looking forward to another good night's sleep. All this storytelling and story listening has made me, to use a cliche, sleep like a baby for the last few nights.
Me too.
Yeah, I think it's taking a lot out of us to do this.
Not long to go now. Just your tale next, Mum, and then the grand finale, courtesy of Zhang, if you will be so willing.
Happy to oblige, Steve.
And I'll begin my story tomorrow. Same time, same place. And now, don't take this the wrong way, hun, but My dear Steve, will you please get the fuck out?
Mom, language.
That's not even a little bit funny.
I get the hint. See you guys later.
Night, Steve. Be back after dawn.